Millionaire leaves his fiancée at the altar after suspecting her intentions. As he looks back on the past, he discovers clues leading to hidden secrets. The situation reveals a plan that makes him rethink everything. Now he faces a battle against manipulation and public judgment. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. The sun lazily rose over the imposing Johnson mansion, painting the sky with pink and orange hues that reflected in the mirrored windows of the building. The property, located in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods of San Francisco, was buzzing with activity since the early morning hours. Hurried gardeners were putting the finishing touches on the vast gardens, while a small fleet of delivery vehicles unloaded floral arrangements and sound equipment. At the center of all this commotion was Michael Johnson, heir to one of the country's largest technology empires. At 32 years old, Michael was known not only for his billionaire fortune, but also for his almost legendary discretion and his stubborn dedication to work. He observed all the movement from his suite on the third floor, his dark brown eyes reflecting a mixture of anxiety and determination. "Everything is as planned, sir," said Anthony, his personal assistant for over a decade, entering the room with a clipboard in hand. "The guests will begin arriving in approximately 2 hours." Michael nodded, adjusting the tie of his impeccably tailored suit. "Thank you, Anthony. Please make sure security is reinforced at the gates. I don't want any intruders or paparazzi ruining this day." As Anthony withdrew to carry out his orders, Michael turned his attention back to the mirror. His reflection showed a man in peak physical condition, with carefully combed black hair and an angular face that rarely betrayed emotions. Today, however, there was a different gleam in his eyes, a mixture of anticipation and perhaps a touch of apprehension. After all, it wasn't every day that Michael Johnson was getting married. The sound of high heels in the corridor announced the arrival of his mother, Eleanor. She entered the room like a perfumed gust of wind, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement. "Oh, my son," she exclaimed, adjusting the lapel of his jacket with nimble fingers. "I can hardly believe this day has finally arrived. You look absolutely stunning." Michael allowed himself a small smile. "Thank you, Mum. You look beautiful too." Eleanor laughed, turning around to show off her elegant navy blue dress. "Oh, but today isn't about me, darling. It's about you and Emily. Speaking of which, have you seen her?" An almost imperceptible frown crossed Michael's forehead. "Not since last night. She said she wanted to follow the tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony." "How romantic," Eleanor sighed. "She is perfect for you, Michael. I'm so happy you finally found someone who completes you." Michael nodded, his thoughts wandering to Emily. They had met just 6 months before at a charity event. Emily Carter, with her golden hair and mesmerizing green eyes, had captured his attention immediately. Smart, charming, and full of innovative ideas, she seemed to be the perfect complement to his meticulously controlled life. The courtship had been a whirlwind. Emily challenged him, made him laugh, took him out of his comfort zone in ways he had never imagined possible. When he proposed to her after only 4 months, he surprised everyone, including himself. For a man known for his caution and meticulous planning, it was a surprisingly impulsive move. "Michael," his mother's voice brought him back to the present. "Are you okay, dear? You seem a bit distant." He forced a reassuring smile. "I'm great, Mom, just a bit nervous, I suppose." Eleanor smiled with understanding. "It's perfectly normal, my love. I remember how your father was nervous on our wedding day. He almost fainted at the altar." She laughed at the memory, her eyes softening with nostalgia. The mention of his father made Michael's heart tighten slightly. James Johnson had passed away 3 years ago, leaving his son not only the direction of the company, but also a legacy of integrity and hard work to honor. "Dad would be proud, wouldn't he?" Michael murmured, more to himself than to his mother. Eleanor placed a gentle hand on his face. "He's already proud, Michael. Always has been." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. It was Anthony again. "Pardon the intrusion, sir. The first guests have begun to arrive." Michael straightened his shoulders, his posture returning to its usual professional rigidity. "Thank you, Anthony. I'll be down in a moment." When the assistant left, Eleanor gave her son one last hug. "Remember, Michael, this is the happiest day of your life. Enjoy every moment." With those words, she left, leaving Michael alone with his thoughts. He turned to the window, watching the luxurious cars beginning to enter the gates of the mansion. Powerful executives, celebrities, politicians, the cream of American society was arriving to witness the union of two of the most influential families in the country. Michael took a deep breath, trying to calm the inexplicable nervousness that was beginning to grow in his chest. It was just the stress of the big day, he told himself. After all, what could go wrong? Adjusting his tie one more time, he prepared to go down and receive his guests. The day he had been waiting for had finally arrived. In a few hours he would be at the altar, ready to begin a new chapter of his life alongside Emily. But as he walked towards the door, a strange and persistent feeling was bothering him. It was as if a distant voice in his mind was trying to tell him something, a warning he couldn't quite decipher. Shaking his head to dispel these thoughts, Michael left the room. The show must go on, and he was the main protagonist. Downstairs, the buzz of animated voices grew as more guests arrived. The perfume of flowers mixed with the aroma of freshly opened champagne. Soft music filled the air, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and celebration. Michael descended the grand staircase, smiling and greeting the guests. He was the image of confidence and success, the perfect groom about to seal a perfect union, but deep in his eyes, almost imperceptible, there was a shadow of doubt, a small crack in the carefully constructed facade that no one, not even himself, had yet perceived. The stage was set. The actors were in their places. And so, with the sun shining over the Johnson mansion, the first act of this story of love, intrigue, and revelations began to unfold. The garden of the Johnson mansion had transformed into a fairy tale scene. Rows of white chairs aligned perfectly, decorated with silk ribbons and fresh flower bouquets. A red carpet extended between them, leading to an elegant altar adorned with floral arches and flickering candles. The excited murmur of guests mixed with the soft sound of a string quartet, creating an almost palpable atmosphere of anticipation. Michael Johnson stood at the altar, his hands crossed in front of his body, his posture as rigid as always. His eyes scanned the crowd of guests, an impressive collection of the country's most influential names. Politicians, business executives, celebrities, all had come to witness the union of the young technology magnate with the charming Emily Carter. Beside Michael, his best friend and business partner Lucas Rodriguez discreetly adjusted his tie. "Relax, man," he whispered, noting the tension in his friend's shoulders. "You look like you're about to close a multi-million-dollar contract, not get married." Michael forced a smile. "Maybe closing contracts is easier," he muttered in response, provoking a muffled laugh from Lucas. Suddenly, the music changed. The chords of the wedding march filled the air, and all eyes turned to the beginning of the red carpet. Michael's heart involuntarily accelerated. And then, she appeared. Emily was a vision in white, her wedding dress flowing around her like an ethereal cloud. Her golden hair was elegantly pinned in an updo, adorned with small white flowers. A delicate veil partially covered her face, but couldn't hide the sparkle of her green eyes or the radiant smile on her lips. As she walked slowly down the corridor, Michael felt a wave of contradictory emotions. Admiration for her beauty, certainly, but also hesitation, a twinge of doubt that he couldn't explain or justify. Emily reached the altar, her smile even more dazzling up close. She extended her hand, and Michael automatically took it, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. The celebrant began the ceremony, his grave voice echoing through the garden. He spoke about love, commitment, about the journey the two were about to embark on together. Michael listened to the words, but they seemed distant, as if coming from far away. Instead, his mind was strangely focused on random details. The way Emily held her bouquet, too tightly, her knuckles white with tension. The slight tremor in her smile when their gazes met. And that perfume. It was different from what she usually wore. Stronger, almost familiar in a way he couldn't identify. "Michael." The celebrant's voice brought him back to reality. "Are you ready to make your vows?" Michael blinked, realizing that all eyes were fixed on him. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, flashes of memory began to invade his mind. Emily whispering on the phone late at night, abruptly hanging up when he entered the room. An unknown man smiling at her at a party, a smile that seemed to carry secrets. Documents on his desk in the study, out of place when he was certain he had put them away. Small details, insignificant on their own, but now seeming to come together in a disturbing puzzle. "Michael?" Emily's voice was soft, concerned. "Are you okay, love?" He looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. And in that moment, an inexplicable certainty hit him. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. His voice failed. He let go of Emily's hand, taking a step back. "I'm sorry. I can't do this." A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. Emily's face turned pale, her eyes widening in surprise and fear. "Michael, what are you saying?" She tried to reach him, but he stepped back even more. "I need time," he said, his voice gaining firmness. "Something isn't right. I need to think." Before anyone could react, Michael turned and began walking quickly down the corridor, ignoring the shocked calls of his mother and the stunned looks of the guests. Behind him, chaos erupted. Voices rose in confusion and speculation. Emily fell to her knees, dramatically sobbing while her bridesmaids ran to comfort her. Eleanor Johnson was pale with shock, being supported by Anthony, but Michael didn't look back. He continued walking, entering the mansion and climbing the stairs 2 steps at a time. Only when he reached his room, closing the door behind him, he allowed the reality of what he had just done to hit him. He had abandoned Emily at the altar. He had humiliated himself and her in front of hundreds of people. He had potentially ruined his reputation and damaged numerous important business relationships. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to regret the decision. Sitting heavily on the edge of the bed, Michael buried his face in his hands. His mind was spinning, trying to process the whirlwind of conflicting emotions and thoughts. What exactly had made him doubt everything at the last moment? What sudden instinct had made him distrust everything? And more importantly, was he right to trust this instinct? Or had he just committed the biggest mistake of his life? A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Michael?" It was Lucas's voice. "Man, what happened down there? Can I come in?" Michael hesitated for a moment before answering. "Come in, Lucas." The door opened and Lucas entered, his face a mixture of concern and confusion. "Dude, what madness was that? Do you have any idea of the chaos down there?" Michael let out a long sigh. I know. It's just that something isn't right, Lucas. I can't explain, but I have this feeling." Lucas sat beside his friend, placing a hand on his shoulder. "What feeling, Rafa? Talk to me." "It's like all of this is a farce," Michael said slowly, trying to articulate the confused thoughts in his mind. "Like Emily isn't who I thought she was." Lucas frowned. "What are you talking about? You guys were so good until yesterday." "I know." Michael stood up abruptly, beginning to pace the room. "That's why it doesn't make sense. But I can't ignore this feeling. Small things I noticed in recent weeks. Details that didn't seem important at the time, but now—" He stopped, turning to face his friend. "Lucas, I need to investigate. I need to be sure that I'm not making the biggest mistake of my life, or avoiding making it." Lucas observed him for a long moment, concern evident in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, Rafa. If this is what you need to do, I'm with you. But what about everyone downstairs? What do you want me to tell them?" Michael ran his hand through his hair, a rare gesture of nervousness. Tell them I got sick, food poisoning or something. Anything to buy me some time." Lucas stood up, squeezing his friend's shoulder. "All right, I'll take care of it. But Michael, be careful, okay? Whatever you're thinking of doing." After Lucas left, Michael stood in the middle of the room, feeling the weight of his decision. Outside, he could hear the growing murmur of guests, the sound of cars leaving. His life, so carefully planned and controlled, had suddenly transformed into chaos. But amid the confusion and doubt, one thing was clear. He couldn't simply ignore his suspicions. He needed to discover the truth, no matter the cost. Walking to the window, Michael watched the last guests leaving. Among them, he saw Emily being taken away by her friends, her face hidden in her hands. For a moment, he felt a twinge of guilt and regret. But then, almost like a sign, he noticed something. A man standing near the gates, watching Emily with an intensity that seemed out of place. When their eyes met, The man quickly looked away and disappeared among the crowd. That sight only served to strengthen Michael's resolution. There was more to this story than appeared, and he was determined to discover exactly what it was. With a last look at the chaos he'd left behind, Michael turned away from the window. The day that should have been the happiest of his life had become the beginning of a journey in search of the truth, and he had a feeling that this journey would be much more complicated and dangerous than he could imagine. Night fell over the Johnson mansion, bringing with it a heavy and oppressive silence. The gardens, which hours before had been buzzing with life and expectation, now lay deserted, with half-undone decorations swaying sadly in the night breeze. Inside the house, the atmosphere was no less gloomy. Michael was sitting in his study, his tie loosened and the first buttons of his shirt open. Before him, on the mahogany desk, lay a half-empty bottle of whiskey. He was distractedly spinning a glass between his fingers, his eyes fixed on his computer screen. A soft knock on the door made him look up. "Come in," he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Eleanor entered, still dressed in her ceremony outfit, though her perfectly arranged hair now showed signs of wear. Her eyes were red and swollen, evidence of tears shed throughout the day. "Son," she began, her voice a mixture of concern and reproach, "you can't hide here forever. We need to talk about what happened." Michael sighed, running his hand over his face. "Mom, I know that you're upset, but—" "Upset?" Eleanor interrupted, her voice rising an octave. "Michael, do you have any idea of the scandal you've caused? The newspapers are already speculating. Our friends, our partners, everyone wants to know what happened." "I know, Mom," Michael responded, his voice tired but firm. "But something wasn't right. I couldn't go through with the wedding feeling that there was something wrong." Eleanor approached, sitting in the chair in front of the desk. "What could be so wrong, Michael? Emily is perfect for you. She's intelligent, beautiful, comes from a good family." "It's more complicated than that," Michael interrupted, leaning forward. "In the past few days, I noticed things, small details that didn't make sense." He paused, organizing his thoughts before continuing. "Secret phone calls, documents out of place, meetings she tried to hide. And today at the altar, everything suddenly seemed to fall into place, like a veil had been lifted from my eyes." Eleanor watched him with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "Michael, you're hearing yourself. This sounds like paranoia." "Maybe the wedding stress—" "It's not paranoia, Mom," Michael insisted, standing up abruptly. He walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. "I trust my instincts. They've never failed me in business, and I don't believe they're failing me now." There was a moment of tense silence before Eleanor spoke again, her voice softer this time. "And what do you intend to do now?" Michael turned, his eyes shining with determination. "I'm going to discover the truth, whatever it is." Eleanor stood up, approaching her son. She placed a gentle hand on his face, her eyes filling with tears again. "Oh, Michael, I just want you to be happy. If this is what you need to do, then I'll support you." Michael covered his mother's hand with his, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Thank you, Mum. This means a lot to me." After Eleanor left, Michael turned his attention back to the computer. He had spent the last few hours reviewing security camera footage from the mansion, looking for anything unusual. That's when he noticed something. The night before the wedding, the cameras caught Emily leaving the house around midnight. She returned almost 2 hours later, seeming agitated and looking nervously around. Intrigued, Michael zoomed in on the image, trying to catch more details. That's when he noticed something in Emily's hand, a small object that she quickly hid in her purse as she entered. "What were you doing, Emily?" Michael muttered to himself, feeling his suspicion grow. Determined to follow this lead, he decided to investigate Emily's room. She had left the mansion hours earlier, taking only a small suitcase, so the rest of her belongings were still there. Michael hesitated for a moment before entering the room. Part of him felt guilty about invading Emily's privacy, but another part insisted that this was necessary to discover the truth. The room was impeccable, as always. Emily was meticulous with her things, a characteristic that Michael had always admired. He began carefully searching, trying not to leave anything out of place. When he opened the bedside table drawer, he found something interesting. A cell phone he had never seen before. It was a simple model, the kind that could be bought at any convenience store. With his heart racing, Michael turned on the device. To his surprise, there was no password. The contact list was empty, but there were several text messages, all from an unidentified number. Michael began reading the messages, feeling his stomach sink with each word. Everything's ready for tomorrow, don't fail. Remember the plan. After the yes, everything changes. The deposit has been made. Your part of the deal is secured. The last message, sent on the morning of the wedding, simply read, "Good luck, dear. We'll be together soon." Michael felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. The messages were vague, but their implications were clear. Emily was involved in some kind of scheme, something that went far beyond a simple marriage of convenience. But what exactly was she planning? And who was the mysterious sender of these messages? While his mind spun with possibilities, Michael heard a sound from the hallway. Footsteps approaching. Quickly, he put the phone back in the drawer and left the room, his heart beating furiously. He reached the hallway just in time to see Lucas turning the corner. "Rafa, there you are," Lucas said, seeming relieved. "I've been looking for you." "We have a problem." "What is it?" Michael asked, trying to calm his breathing. Lucas hesitated for a moment before responding. "It's Emily. She gave an interview to the press. Well, you need to see for yourself." Michael followed Lucas to the living room, where the TV was on a news channel. On the screen, Emily appeared, her eyes red from crying, speaking to a crowd of reporters. "I don't understand what happened," she was saying, her voice choked. "Michael was always so controlling, so obsessive with his work. But I never imagined he would humiliate me like this in front of everyone." Michael watched, stunned, as Emily painted a picture of him as an abusive, controlling groom, insinuating that his erratic behavior at the altar was just the culmination of months of emotional manipulation. "She's lying," Michael muttered, his voice laden with disbelief and anger. "This is all a lie." Lucas put a hand on his friend's shoulder. "I know, man, but the press is eating it up. Social media is already on fire." Michael moved away from the TV, his mind working furiously. The puzzle pieces were beginning to align, but the complete picture was still far from clear. "Lucas," he said, turning to his friend with determination in his eyes, "I need your help. There's something much bigger happening here, and we need to find out what it is before it's too late." Lucas nodded, his expression serious. "I'm with you, Rafa. What do you need?" Michael looked again at the TV, where Emily continued her emotional performance. His eyes narrowed, a mixture of hurt and resolution in his gaze. "First," he said, "we need to find out who's behind all this. And then we'll expose the truth no matter the cost." As the night advanced, Michael and Lucas began to trace their plan. The hunt for the truth had begun, and Michael was determined to go to the end, even if that meant unearthing secrets he might prefer not to know. What had begun as a day of celebration had transformed into the beginning of a dangerous journey in search of the truth. And Michael had a feeling that the revelations awaiting him would change his life forever. Michael's office was plunged into twilight, illuminated only by the bluish light of multiple computer screens. The clock on the wall marked 3:47 a.m., but time seemed to have lost its meaning for the two men bent over their keyboards. Michael and Lucas had spent the last few hours meticulously searching through Emily's digital life. Emails, browsing history, call logs, nothing escaped their scrutiny. "Rafa, look at this," Lucas called, pointing to his screen. "I found a series of suspicious bank transfers in Emily's account." Michael approached, his tired eyes narrowing as he examined the numbers. "Regular deposits from an offshore account, starting exactly 3 months before we met," he muttered, his voice laden with disbelief and anger. Lucas nodded grimly. "And the amounts are substantial, far beyond what she could earn from her marketing consulting work." Michael moved away, running his hands over his face in a gesture of frustration. So everything was planned from the beginning. But why? What did she really want? "Maybe it's not just about money," Lucas suggested, spinning in his chair to face his friend. "Think about it, Rafa. You're more than just rich. You have access to information, technologies, powerful people." Michael froze, a new wave of understanding hitting him. "My God, Lucas. What if the target was never me personally, but the company?" The two exchanged worried looks, the weight of this possibility hanging heavily in the air. The Johnson Tech was not just one of the largest technology companies in the United States, but was also involved in sensitive government projects and cutting-edge innovations. "We need to dig deeper," Michael declared, returning to his computer with renewed determination. If Emily is involved in some kind of industrial espionage or sabotage, we need to find out before it's too late. The following hours were a blur of codes, searches, and data decryption. Michael silently thanked his programming skills and Lucas's digital security expertise. Together, they formed a formidable team. It was almost dawn when they made another crucial discovery. "Rafa, I think I found something," Lucas called, his voice tense with excitement. "I managed to access the location history of Emily's secret cell phone." Michael approached quickly, his eyes scanning the map on the screen. "That address, isn't it the Vertex Systems office?" Lucas nodded, typing quickly. "Exactly, and look, she was there several times in recent weeks, always outside business hours." Vertex Systems was one of the main competitors of Johnson Tech, known for its aggressive market tactics and rumors of unethical practices. "This can't be a coincidence," Michael muttered, his mind working furiously. "Lucas, can you access the security cameras in that area?" With a few quick commands, Lucas managed to hack into the street surveillance system. They watched, tense, as the recordings from recent weeks played. And there it was, Emily, sneaking into the Vertex Systems building late at night. But what really made Michael's blood freeze was the figure accompanying her on one of these occasions. "No way," he whispered, leaning closer to the screen. The man beside Emily was tall, with graying hair and an imposing bearing. Even in the low-quality recording, his identity was unmistakable. "Victor Rodriguez," Lucas confirmed, his voice laden with concern. "The CEO of Vertex Systems in person." Michael moved away from the screen, feeling suddenly nauseous. Victor Rodriguez was not just a business rival. He was known for his lack of scruples, having been investigated several times for illegal practices, though he always managed to slip through legal loopholes. "They're working together," Michael concluded, his voice low and dangerous. "Emily Rodriguez, all of this was an elaborate plan to infiltrate Johnson Tech." Lucas looked at his friend, concern evident in his eyes. "Rafa, this is big, very big. What are we going to do?" Michael was silent for a long moment, his face a mask of determination. When he finally spoke, his voice was laden with resolve. "We're going to turn the tables," he declared. "They think they've caught me off guard, that I'm cornered and on the defensive. But now we have information they don't know we have." He began to pace the office, his mind working on a plan. "First, we need to secure all of our systems and projects. Lucas, I want you to lead a complete security audit with maximum discretion." Lucas nodded, already picking up his phone to make some calls. "Then," Michael continued, "we're going to set a trap. We'll leak some false information, something that seems valuable enough to attract Emily and Rodriguez." "And when they take the bait?" Lucas asked, a smile forming on his face. Michael smiled back, but it was a cold, calculating smile. "Then we catch them. With enough evidence not just to ruin their reputations, but to take them to court." While the sun rose, painting the sky over San Francisco with pink and orange tones, Michael and Lucas continued to refine their plan. The battle that was approaching would not be fought in boardrooms or courtrooms, but in the shadowy world of corporate espionage and digital manipulation. Michael knew he was about to enter a dangerous game where the stakes were high and the enemies merciless. But for the first time since the wedding disaster, he felt in control. The pain of Emily's betrayal still burned in his chest, but now it was fueled by a fierce determination. He would prove that he was not just the heir to a technology empire, but a formidable adversary in his own right. And in the process, he might finally understand the true extent of the web of lies Emily had woven around him. As he prepared for the day ahead, Michael cast one last look at Emily's photo on his desk. With a quick movement, he turned the frame face down. The game had begun, and he was determined to win no matter the cost. The afternoon sun bathed the conference room at the top of the Johnson Tech building. Michael stood by the panoramic window, overlooking the San Francisco skyline while waiting for the arrival of his trusted team. His eyes, though tired from sleepless nights, sparkled with determination. The door opened and Lucas entered, followed by Mariana Costa, the brilliant head of company security, and Dr. Eduardo Fontes, the longtime corporate lawyer of Johnson Tech. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Michael said, turning to face them. "We have much to discuss and little time." Mariana was the first to speak, her voice tense with concern. "Michael, I completed the security audit you requested. The news isn't good." Michael nodded gravely. "Tell me everything, Mari." "We found evidence of several unauthorized access attempts to our systems in recent months," she explained, projecting graphs and logs on the main screen. "Most were blocked by our firewalls, but—" She hesitated, looking nervously at Michael. "But," he encouraged. "But there were some breaches," Mariana admitted. "Small, but significant. Someone managed to access information about Project Artemis." Michael felt his stomach sink. Project Artemis was Johnson Tech's most recent and secret development, an artificial intelligence innovation that could revolutionize various sectors, from healthcare to national security. "How much did they get?" Lucas asked, his voice tense. "Not much," Mariana responded. "Mainly initial drafts and conceptual notes, but it's enough to give someone an idea of the direction we're taking." Michael took a deep breath, processing the information. "And the origin of these accesses?" Mariana projected a new map on the screen. "Most come from IP addresses we've traced to proxy servers in Eastern Europe, but—" She hesitated again. "Speak, Mari," Michael insisted. "One of the accesses came from within our network," she said finally, "from a terminal registered for use by Emily." A heavy silence fell over the room. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, allowing the confirmation of his suspicions to settle. "So, we have concrete proof," he said finally, his voice surprisingly calm. Dr. Fontes cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Proof, yes, but we need to be careful about how we use it. Industrial espionage accusations are serious, and Vertex Systems has a formidable legal team." Michael nodded, turning to the window for a moment. When he turned back, there was a calculating gleam in his eyes. "That's why we won't attack directly," he declared. "We'll use the strategy we discussed, Lucas. We'll give them exactly what they want, or at least what they think they want." Lucas smiled, understanding immediately. "The fake bait." Michael agreed. "Exactly. Mari, I want you to create a set of false data about Project Artemis. Make it look convincing, but with subtle flaws that only we will know how to identify." Mariana nodded, already making notes on her tablet. "Lucas, you'll accidentally leave these data vulnerable. Create a security breach that looks like a slip-up, but is actually a trap." "Consider it done," Lucas responded with a confident smile. Michael turned to the lawyer. "Dr. Fontes, I need you to prepare all necessary legal documentation. When we catch Emily and Rodriguez trying to steal these fake data, I want to be sure we can prosecute them with everything we have." The lawyer nodded gravely. "I'll prepare everything, Michael, but I must warn you, this will be a difficult battle. The company's reputation is at stake." "I know," Michael responded, his voice firm. "But we can't let them get away with this. It's not just about Johnson Tech or about me. It's about integrity in business, about protecting innovations that can benefit millions." He paused, looking at each person in the room. "I know I'm asking a lot from you. This goes beyond our normal responsibilities. If anyone wants to back out now, I'll understand." There was a moment of silence before Mariana spoke. "I'm with you, Rafa. Always." "No need to ask, man," Lucas added with a smile. Dr. Fontes adjusted his glasses, a small smile on his lips. "Well, it seems I'll have to postpone my retirement for a few more months. Count on me, Michael." After Lucas left, Michael stood in the middle of the room, feeling the weight of his decision. Outside, he could hear the growing murmur of guests, the sound of cars leaving. His life, so carefully planned and controlled, had suddenly transformed into chaos. But amid the confusion and doubt, one thing was clear. He couldn't simply ignore his suspicions. He needed to discover the truth, no matter the cost. Walking to the window, Michael watched the last guests leaving. Among them, he saw Emily being taken away by her friends, her face hidden in her hands. For a moment, he felt a twinge of guilt and regret. But then, almost like a sign, he noticed something. A man standing near the gates, watching Emily with an intensity that seemed out of place. When their eyes met, the man quickly looked away and disappeared among the crowd. That sight only served to strengthen Michael's resolution. There was more to this story than appeared, and he was determined to discover exactly what it was. The following days were a whirlwind of preparation. While maintaining the company's normal operations, Michael and his team worked tirelessly behind the scenes, preparing their elaborate trap. Mariana created a set of false data so convincing that even some internal engineers were impressed. Lucas established a security flaw that was a masterpiece of reverse engineering, designed to attract experienced hackers. Meanwhile, Michael maintained appearances. He gave carefully calculated interviews, expressing his sadness about the end of the engagement, but maintaining a professional and forward-looking tone. Internally, he instructed employees to treat any contact from Emily or Vertex Systems with extreme caution, but without raising suspicions. Tension grew with each passing day. Michael knew they were walking a tightrope. One misstep and the entire plan could collapse, potentially taking Johnson Tech down with it. It was on a night almost 2 weeks after the failed wedding that the alert sounded. Michael was in his office when Lucas burst through the door, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Rafa, they took the bait!" Michael stood up in a leap. "Are you sure?" Lucas nodded, showing his tablet. "I just detected an unauthorized access attempt to the fake data. And guess where the signal came from?" "Vertex Systems," Michael breathed, feeling a mixture of triumph and apprehension. "Exactly," Lucas confirmed. "And the best part, we managed to trace the access to a specific device." Michael narrowed his eyes. "Emily's cell phone?" Lucas smiled. Bingo. For a moment, Michael was silent, absorbing the information. Finally, he spoke, his voice laden with determination. "Okay, it's time to close the trap. Call Mariana and Dr. Fontes. We're going to end this once and for all." While Lucas left to make the calls, Michael turned to the window watching the city lights. The final game was about to begin, and he was ready to confront Emily and Rodriguez head-on. But even amid his determination, a small voice in the back of his mind was bothering him. Was he truly prepared for the revelations that were about to come? And what would be the consequences of this battle, not just for his company, but for his already wounded heart? With a deep sigh, Michael pushed those doubts away. There was no turning back now. It was time to fight. The morning arrived with a palpable tension in the air. Michael adjusted his tie in the mirror, his reflection returning a look of fierce determination. Today would be the day he would confront not just his enemies, but his own internal demons. Arriving at Johnson Tech, he found his team already gathered in the crisis room. Mariana, Lucas, and Dr. Fontes were waiting, their faces a mixture of anxiety and resolution. "Good morning, everyone," Michael greeted, his voice calm, masking the inner storm. "Let's recap the plan one last time." Lucas took the lead, projecting a diagram on the main screen. "Right. Last night we detected the attempt to access the fake Artemis project data. As predicted, the signal came from Vertex Systems, specifically from Emily's cell phone." Mariana continued. "We monitored the activity throughout the night. They downloaded about 60% of the false data before interrupting the process, probably to avoid detection." "Great," Michael nodded. "And what about our next step?" Dr. Fontes cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "I've already prepared all the legal documentation. We have sufficient evidence for a lawsuit for industrial espionage and intellectual property violation. However," he hesitated. "However," Michael encouraged. "However, I suggest that before taking legal measures, we try a more direct approach," the lawyer concluded. Michael raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "A confrontation," Dr. Fontes explained. "Summon Victor Rodriguez for a meeting, supposedly to discuss a possible partnership. When he's here, we'll present our evidence. This will give us the psychological advantage and maybe even the opportunity to negotiate on our terms." Michael considered the idea for a moment, a slow smile forming on his lips. "I like this. Mariana, can you arrange this meeting?" She nodded, already typing on her tablet. "Consider it done. Should I include Emily in the invitation?" Michael hesitated for a second, his heart giving an involuntary jump at hearing her name. "Yes," he finally responded. "Let's bring all the players to the table." The following hours were a whirlwind of preparations. While Mariana and Lucas refined the technical details of their presentation, Dr. Fontes instructed Michael on the legal nuances of the situation. Finally, at 2 p.m. sharp, The receptionist announced the arrival of Victor Rodriguez and Emily Carter. Michael took a deep breath, smoothing his suit. "Let's receive them," he said to his team, his voice firm. When the elevator doors opened, Michael felt his heart accelerate. Victor Rodriguez entered first, tall and imposing in his expensive suit, a confident smile on his face. And right behind him, Emily. She was stunning as always, in an elegant navy blue dress that Michael recognized. He had given it to her on their anniversary. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Michael saw a glimpse of something. Fear, regret. He couldn't decipher it. "Michael!" Victor exclaimed, advancing with an extended hand. "What a pleasure to finally meet in person, although the circumstances are somewhat unusual." Michael shook his hand, his grip firm. "Indeed, Mr. Rodriguez. Please come in. We have much to discuss." He guided the group to the conference room, noting how Emily stayed slightly behind Victor, avoiding his gaze. Once everyone was seated, Michael took his place at the head of the table. "Before we begin, I'd like to thank both of you for coming on such short notice." Victor smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Well, when the great Michael Johnson calls, who are we to refuse? Especially considering the recent events." Michael noticed the quick glance Victor threw at Emily. "Interesting." "Well," Michael began, his voice calm and controlled, "I called you here today because I believe we have an urgent matter to discuss. Something that involves our two companies in a way that I'm sure you'll find fascinating, Mr. Rodriguez." Victor leaned forward, interest sparkling in his eyes. "Oh, now you've piqued my curiosity, young man. What is this about?" Michael made a gesture to Lucas, who activated the main screen of the room. Immediately, a series of graphs, logs, and images filled the wall. "This," Michael said, his voice now laden with steel, "is a compilation of detailed evidence of multiple unauthorized access attempts to Johnson Tech's systems in recent months. Attempts that curiously seem to have originated from IP addresses associated with Vertex systems." Victor's smile wavered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "My, Michael, these are very serious accusations. I'm sure there must be some misunderstanding." "Oh, I agree they are serious," Michael continued, his voice gaining intensity. "Especially considering that the last of these attempts, occurring last night, can be traced directly to a device belonging to a certain collaborator of yours." At this moment, all eyes turned to Emily. She turned pale visibly, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I can explain." "There's nothing to explain, dear," Victor interrupted abruptly, his facade of charm beginning to crack. He turned to Michael, his eyes hard. "What do you want, Johnson? Money? A forced partnership? Name your price." Michael stood slowly, leaning forward with his hands on the table. "What I want, Mr. Rodriguez, is the truth. I want to know why you thought it necessary to orchestrate this elaborate scheme. Why involve Emily? Why try to steal our industrial secrets when Vertex Systems is a respectable company in its own right?" Victor let out a bitter laugh. "Respectable? Ha! You have no idea about the real world of business, boy. Sometimes to stay on top, you need to adapt." "Adapt?" Michael repeated, incredulous. "Is that what you call industrial espionage and emotional manipulation?" It was at this moment that Emily finally found her voice. "Enough!" she shouted, standing up abruptly. Tears glistened in her eyes. "I can't take this anymore." Everyone turned to her, shocked by the sudden outburst. "Michael," she continued, her voice trembling, "you're right. About everything. I was hired by Victor to get close to you, to gain your trust and access information from Johnson Tech." Victor tried to interrupt her, but she silenced him with a fierce look. At first it was just a job, but then she hesitated, looking directly at Michael. "Then I really fell in love with you, and I realized the terrible mistake I had made." Michael felt his heart tighten. Part of him desperately wanted to believe her, but distrust still burned strong. "If you really fell in love," he said slowly, "why did you continue with the plan? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Emily lowered her gaze, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Because I was a coward. Because I was afraid of the consequences. And because," she cast a glance at Victor, "there were threats involved." Victor stood up abruptly, his face red with fury. This is ridiculous. I won't stand here listening to these lies." But before he could leave, Michael made a gesture and 2 security guards appeared at the door. "I think we all have much more to discuss, Mr. Rodriguez," Michael said coldly. "About business ethics, legal consequences, and perhaps about redemption." The air in the room was charged with tension. Michael looked from Victor to Emily, feeling the weight of the revelations and the decisions he would still have to make. This was just the beginning of the confrontation. The true legal, emotional, and ethical battles were yet to come. And Michael knew that the choices he would make in the next moments would shape not only the future of his company, but also his own destiny. The silence that followed Emily's confession was almost palpable. Michael remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the woman who, until a few days ago, he believed was the love of his life. His mind was spinning, trying to process everything he had just heard. Victor Rodriguez was the first to break the tense silence. "This is absurd," he bellowed, his face red with anger. "You have no concrete proof of anything, Johnson. It's her word against mine." Michael diverted his gaze from Emily to face Victor. His voice was surprisingly calm when he spoke. "Actually, Mr. Rodriguez, we have much more than words." With a wave to Lucas, a new series of data appeared on the main screen. They were detailed records of bank transfers, encrypted emails, and audio recordings. "This," Michael continued, "is just a fraction of the evidence we've collected. We have records of payments from Vertex Systems to an offshore account linked to Emily. We have emails exchanged between you two discussing the details of the plan. And most importantly, we have recordings of your conversations specifically planning how to infiltrate Johnson Tech." Victor turned pale visibly, his gaze jumping between the screen, Michael, and Emily. How did you get this?" he stammered. Michael allowed himself a small smile. "Let's just say that underestimating Johnson Tech's technical capabilities was your first mistake." Emily, who until then had been silent, stepped forward. "Michael, I'm sorry. I never wanted things to get to this point." Michael looked at her, feeling a turbulent mix of emotions, anger, hurt, confusion, and surprisingly, a twinge of compassion. "Why, Emily? Why did you agree to all this in the first place?" She took a deep breath, tears still glistening in her eyes. "I was desperate. My family was having financial problems, and Victor, he offered a way out. At first it seemed like just a competitive intelligence job, but then you discovered it was much more than that," Michael softly completed. Emily nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "When I realized the extent of what I was doing, it seemed too late to turn back. And then—" She hesitated, casting a nervous glance at Victor. "And then," Michael encouraged. "And then the threat started," she whispered. "Not just against me, but against my family." Victor let out a bitter laugh. "This is ridiculous. She's clearly trying to save her own skin." Michael raised a hand, silencing him. "Mr. Rodriguez, I believe we've heard enough from you for now." He turned to the security guards at the door. "Please escort Mr. Rodriguez to a separate room. Our lawyers would like to have a word with him." While Victor was led away, protesting vehemently, Michael turned his attention to Emily. For a long moment, he simply observed her, as if trying to decipher a complex puzzle. "Emily," he finally said, his voice softer now, "I need to know. Everything we lived, everything we shared, was it real? Was any part of it true?" She raised her gaze, meeting his eyes for the first time since the confrontation began. "Michael, I swear. At first, it was just a mission. But as time passed, as I got to know you truly, I fell in love. Genuinely. And it was destroying me inside, knowing I was betraying you, betraying what we had." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing her words. When he opened them again, there was a mixture of pain and determination in his gaze. "I want to believe you, Emily. But you understand that trust has been completely broken, right?" She nodded sadly. "I know, and I don't expect your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth." Michael turned to his team. "Lucas, Mariana, Dr. Fontes, could you give us a moment, please?" After exchanging worried looks, they agreed and left the room, leaving Michael and Emily alone. The silence stretched between them, loaded with unspoken words and turbulent emotions. Finally, Michael spoke. "Emily, what you did, what you all did, is unforgivable, from a legal and ethical standpoint. Johnson Tech suffered a serious violation, and there are consequences for that. She lowered her head, resigned. I understand. However, he continued, his voice softening slightly, your cooperation and voluntary confession will be taken into consideration. And if what you say about the threats is true, that will also be investigated. Emily looked at him, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. What does this mean? Michael sighed deeply. It means that although I can't simply let this go, I'm willing to hear your full version of the story. And depending on what you tell us, and how useful it is in dismantling any larger scheme that Vertex Systems might have, we can consider an agreement. She nodded vigorously. I'll tell everything, every detail. I want to do the right thing, Michael. Even if it's too late for us, I want to correct my mistakes. Michael observed her for a long moment, feeling the weight of the decisions he would have to make, not just as CEO of Johnson Tech, but as a man who had been deeply hurt. All right, he said finally. Let's start from the beginning. I want to know everything, Emily. And this time only the truth. As they sat for what would be a long and painful conversation, Michael knew that the revelations to come would change everything. The future of his company, his own reputation, and perhaps most importantly, his heart, were all at stake. As Emily began to speak, unraveling the complex web of lies, manipulations, and regrets, Michael felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, the truth was coming to light, and with it, perhaps, would come the chance for healing and redemption, not just for Emily, but for himself. The hours dragged on while Emily unraveled the intricate series of events that had led them to this point. Michael listened attentively, his face a mask of concentration, occasionally asking questions to clarify details. The conference room, once a stage for heated confrontations, now seemed like a silent confessional. Everything started about a year ago, Emily explained, her voice tired but firm. My father had made some risky investments, and our family was on the brink of bankruptcy. That's when Victor Rodriguez appeared, offering a business opportunity. Michael nodded, encouraging her to continue. At first, it seemed simple. He wanted information about Johnson Tech, nothing that couldn't be obtained through normal market research. But then, she hesitated, swallowing hard. Then the demands began to increase. He wanted internal details, development projects, future strategies. And that's when you approached me, Michael concluded, his voice neutral. Emily nodded. Yes. Victor had discovered that you were looking for a marketing consultant. He forged my resume, created false references, everything to put me in a position to get close to you. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, remembering how impressed he had been with Emily's resume at the time. Everything had been a facade from the beginning. But then something changed, didn't it? He asked softly, opening his eyes to look at her. Emily looked at him directly, her voice trembling slightly. Yes, I fell in love with you, Michael. For real. And that's when everything became complicated. I wanted to get out, wanted to tell the truth, but Victor wouldn't allow it, Michael completed. She nodded sadly. He started threatening me. Said he would ruin my family if I didn't cooperate. And then when he realized I was hesitating, he threatened you too. Michael leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Threatened me? How? He said he had compromising information about your father, Emily revealed, her voice almost a whisper. Something related to the early days of Johnson Tech. He threatened to expose these details, destroy your father's legacy and ruin the company's reputation. Michael felt like he had been punched in the stomach. His father had always been his hero, the example of integrity and ethics in business. The idea that there could be dark secrets in his past was disturbing. What kind of information? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Emily shook her head. I don't know the details. Victor never told me specifically, but he seemed very confident that it was something that could cause serious damage. Michael stood up abruptly, walking to the window. His mind was spinning with the implications of what he had just heard. It was no longer just about industrial espionage or personal betrayal now. The legacy of his family, the reputation his father had built over decades, was potentially at risk. After a long moment of silence, he turned to Emily. Why are you telling me this now? Why not before? She looked at him directly, her eyes full of remorse and determination, because I realized the price of silence was too high. I couldn't live with the constant lies and fear anymore. And because, she hesitated for a moment, because despite everything, I still care about you, Michael. You deserve to know the truth, all of it. Michael observed her carefully, searching for any sign of deception, but all he saw was genuine sincerity and remorse. He let out a long sigh, feeling the weight of the revelations on his shoulders. Emily, I appreciate your honesty, but you understand that this doesn't change what was done, right? The consequences still exist. She nodded sadly. I know, and I'm prepared to face them. Whatever the punishment, I'll accept it. I just ask that, if possible, you protect my family. They knew nothing about this. Michael considered her words for a moment before speaking. I'll do what I can to ensure your family doesn't suffer for your actions. As for you, he paused, carefully weighing his next words. Your cooperation will be taken into consideration, but there will be legal consequences, Emily. I can't simply ignore what happened. I understand, she said softly, and I accept that. Michael walked back to the table, sitting again. Is there anything else you need to tell me? Anything that might help us fully understand the extent of this scheme? Emily thought for a moment before responding. There is a deposit, a place where Victor keeps physical documents, data backups, information he considers too sensitive to keep digitally. Michael's eyes narrowed. You know where this deposit is? She nodded. Yes. And I can take you to it. Michael felt a wave of adrenaline. This could be the key to unraveling Victor Rodriguez's entire scheme and possibly to protecting his father's legacy. Right, he said, his voice firm. We'll check out this deposit, but first I need to talk to my team. He stood, walking towards the door. Before leaving, however, he turned to Emily one last time. Emily, he said softly, thank you for finally telling the truth. I can't promise forgiveness, not now, but it's a start. With these words, he left the room, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts and regrets. Outside, Michael found his team waiting anxiously. Their faces were a mixture of concern and curiosity. And then, Lucas asked, being the first to break the silence. Michael looked at each of them before responding. We have a lot of work ahead, and possibly a new battle to fight. As he began to explain what he had discovered, Michael knew that the next steps would be crucial. The truth had been revealed, but the price of this truth was yet to be fully understood. The puzzle pieces were finally fitting together, but the image they formed was much more complex and disturbing than any of them could have imagined. And at the center, looming like a threatening shadow, was the question that now consumed Michael. What exactly did Victor Rodriguez know about his father, and how far would he go to use that information? The hunt for the truth was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The night fell over San Francisco when Michael, accompanied by Lucas and 2 trusted security guards, drove to the location indicated by Emily. The deposit was located in an industrial area on the outskirts of the city, an unlikely place to keep such valuable secrets. Are you sure you want to do this personally, Rafa? Lucas asked, his voice laden with concern. We could have sent a team. Michael kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel. I need to see with my own eyes, Lucas. If there's something about my father there, I have to be the one to discover it. The car stopped in front of a complex of seemingly abandoned warehouses. Michael consulted the paper, where Emily had written the instructions. Warehouse 17, he muttered, his eyes scanning the faded numbers on the doors. They walked in silence, tension palpable in the air. When they finally reached the correct warehouse, Michael hesitated for a moment before inserting the code Emily had provided. With a metallic click, the door opened. The interior of the warehouse was surprisingly organized. Rows of files and boxes were meticulously aligned, each labeled with enigmatic codes. My God, Lucas whispered, his eyes wide. This is a goldmine of information, Michael completed, his voice a mixture of admiration and apprehension. They began searching through the boxes, each taking a different corridor. The security guards remained vigilant at the entrance, ensuring they weren't surprised. After almost an hour of frantic searching, Lucas's voice echoed through the warehouse. Michael, I think I found something. Michael ran to where Lucas was, his heart accelerating. Lucas was holding a thick folder, the label on the front reading simply, Project Phoenix, J. Johnson. With trembling hands, Michael opened the folder. His eyes quickly scanned the documents, absorbing information that made his stomach churn. "It can't be," he muttered, his voice almost inaudible. Lucas looked over his shoulder, his expression becoming increasingly concerned as he read, "Rafa, this is serious." The documents detailed a secret project from Johnson Tech's early years. Project Phoenix, as it was called, involved the development of a highly invasive surveillance software created on commission for an unspecified government client. "My father always said he would never work on projects that could compromise people's privacy," Michael said. His voice choked. "He built the company's reputation on ethical principles." Lucas placed a reassuring hand on his friend's shoulder. "Maybe there's more to this story, Rafa. Don't jump to conclusions." Michael continued reading, his eyes widening as he absorbed more information. The project had been abruptly terminated after 18 months of development. The last pages contained handwritten notes from his father, expressing deep regret and determination to change the company's direction. He realized he had made a mistake, Michael muttered, a mix of relief and sadness in his voice. He terminated the project, even knowing it could cost the company millions. Lucas nodded, understanding the magnitude of the situation. "But Victor Rodriguez somehow got hold of these documents and was willing to use them against you." Michael closed the folder, his mind working furiously. "We need to take these out of here. There's much more to investigate, but we can't risk Victor or his associates destroying this evidence." They quickly began collecting the most relevant boxes and folders, carrying them to the car. While working, Michael couldn't help but think about his father. The man he idolized had indeed made mistakes, but he had also had the courage to correct them, even in the face of significant personal and professional costs. When they finally finished loading the car, Michael stopped for a moment, looking at the now partially empty warehouse. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked softly. Michael let out a long sigh. "I'm thinking that the truth is much more complex than we imagined, and that maybe I was too quick to judge Emily." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "She made mistakes. Serious mistakes," Michael explained. "But she also had the courage to admit them and try to correct them, just like my father did years ago." They entered the car in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. While driving back to the city, Michael felt the weight of the night's revelations settling on his shoulders. "What will we do now?" Lucas asked after a few minutes. Michael looked at his friend, determination shining in his eyes. "Now we'll use this information to end Rodriguez's plans once and for all, and then—" He paused, a small smile forming on his lips. "Then, I think I need to have another conversation with Emily." Lucas nodded, understanding. The night had brought shocking revelations, but also a new perspective. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in days, Michael felt like he was in control. As the car wound through the streets of San Francisco, Michael knew that the next few hours would be crucial. He had the puzzle pieces in his hands now. It was time to put them together and reveal the complete picture, no matter how painful it might be. With a last look at the boxes in the back seat, Michael accelerated. The truth, with all its nuances and complexities, was finally within his reach, and he was determined to face it head-on, no matter the cost. The morning arrived with an urgent atmosphere. Michael had spent the entire night reviewing the documents found in the warehouse, each page revealing more details about his father's complex past and Victor Rodriguez's manipulations. At 9 a.m. sharp, the main conference room of Johnson Tech was full. Michael sat at the head of the table, flanked by Lucas and Dr. Fontes. Mariana was positioned near the main screen, ready to present the collected evidence. On the other side of the table, Victor Rodriguez sat rigidly, his lawyer by his side. And to many's surprise, Emily was present, sitting slightly apart, her face a mask of apprehension and determination. Michael stood up, his posture emanating a confidence he didn't fully feel inside. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this morning. We are here to resolve once and for all the situation that has threatened not only Johnson Tech, but the integrity of the entire technology sector." Victor Rodriguez let out a scornful laugh. What dramatics, Johnson? Still think you can intimidate me with your unfounded accusations? Michael merely smiled slightly. Oh, they are not unfounded. In fact, they are very well grounded. He gestured to Mariana, who began projecting images and documents on the screen. What you are seeing now are concrete evidence of industrial espionage, blackmail, and manipulation, orchestrated by Vertex Systems under your direct supervision, Mr. Rodriguez. Victor turned pale visibly, but maintained his challenging posture. This is absurd. These evidences could easily have been fabricated. Perhaps, Michael conceded, but what about this? He gestured again, and Mariana projected the Project Phoenix documents. Victor's face contorted in a mixture of surprise and fury. Where did you get this? Michael leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Victor. Let's just say you're not the only one who knows how to play this game, Mr. Rodriguez. We found your little secret hideout, and I must say it was fascinating reading. Victor stood up abruptly, his face red with anger. You have no idea what you're meddling with, boy. These documents are just the tip of the iceberg. Your precious father— My father, Michael interrupted, his voice firm, made mistakes. Yes, he was involved in questionable projects early in his career, but unlike you, Mr. Rodriguez, he had the courage and integrity to recognize his errors and correct them. Michael stood up, walking slowly around the table. What you didn't understand in your blind greed is that these documents are not a weapon against me or Johnson Tech. They are a testimony to the ethical evolution of a company and a man. He stopped beside Emily, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. She looked at him, surprised. You thought you could use Emily against me, that you could manipulate our emotions for your own purposes. But you underestimated something crucial, the human capacity for change and redemption. Victor looked from Michael to Emily, understanding finally settling in his eyes. Your little traitor. She told you everything, didn't she? Emily stood up, facing Victor with a courage that surprised even Michael. Yes, I told everything. Because I realized that the true mistake was not falling in love with Michael, but trusting you in the first place. Michael continued, his voice now laden with authority. Mr. Rodriguez, the game is over. We have enough evidence not just to prosecute you for industrial espionage, but also for blackmail, coercion, and a series of other ethical and legal violations. Victor's lawyer began to protest, but Michael silenced him with a gesture. However, he continued, I'm willing to offer a deal. The room fell into absolute silence, all eyes fixed on Michael. You will immediately resign from your position at Vertex Systems. You will sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement about everything you know about Johnson Tech and its employees, and you will completely withdraw from the technology sector. Victor laughed bitterly. And why would I do that? Michael smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Because if you don't, not only will we make public all the evidence we have against you, but we'll also deliver to the federal police the proof of your, let's say, less orthodox financial transactions that we found in your deposit. Victor's face lost all color. He looked at his lawyer, who merely nodded in defeat. You can't do this, Victor muttered, but his voice had lost all confidence. I can and will, Michael responded firmly. The choice is yours, Mr. Rodriguez. Leave now with some dignity intact, or face the full consequences of your actions. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, with a defeated sigh, Victor nodded. Fine, you win, Johnson. Where do I sign? The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers drafting agreements, documents being signed, hands being shaken with reluctance. When it finally ended, Victor Rodriguez left Johnson Tech not as the powerful CEO who had entered, but as a broken and defeated man. After Victor's departure, Michael found himself alone in the conference room with Emily. The silence between them was loaded with unspoken emotions. Michael, Emily began, but he gently interrupted her. Emily, what you did was wrong. You hurt me deeply and put at risk everything my family worked for. She lowered her head, tears glistening in her eyes. But, Michael continued, his voice softening, you also had the courage to admit your mistakes and try to correct them. And that means something. Emily looked at him, hope shining in her eyes. What does this mean for us? Michael sighed, running his hand through his hair. Honestly, I don't know. Trust has been broken, and rebuilding it won't be easy. But maybe, with time and effort, we can at least try. A small smile formed on Emily's lips. It's more than I deserve, but it's all I can ask. Thank you, Michael. As they left the room together, Michael felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, he felt hopeful. The battle had been won, but the journey of healing and reconstruction was just beginning. For Johnson Tech, for his family legacy, and perhaps for his heart. The weeks following the confrontation with Victor Rodriguez were a whirlwind of activities for Michael and Johnson Tech. The news of Rodriguez's resignation and vague insinuations of unethical practices at Vertex Systems sent waves of shock through the corporate world. While speculations ran wild in the media, Michael and his team worked tirelessly behind the scenes to stabilize the situation and protect the company's future. On a sunny Friday afternoon, Michael was in his office, looking out the window at the San Francisco skyline. The phone on his desk rang, pulling him from his thoughts. Mr. Johnson, his assistant's voice sounded. Ms. Costa is here for the meeting. Thank you, you can send her in, Michael responded, turning toward the door. Mariana entered, carrying a folder and a tablet. Her face showed signs of exhaustion, but there was a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. Good news, I hope, Michael asked, indicating a chair for her to sit. Mariana nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. The best possible, considering the circumstances. Our internal audit is almost complete, and I can confidently say we've contained all information leaks. Michael let out a sigh of relief. Great. And what about the projects that were compromised? Well, the Artemis project suffered some setbacks, but nothing we can't overcome, she explained, sliding her finger across the tablet screen. In fact, the development team sees this as an opportunity to refine the system even further, making it even more secure and efficient. Michael smiled, feeling a wave of pride for his team. Impressive. Always turning challenges into opportunities. Mariana hesitated for a moment before continuing. There's one more thing, Michael. It's about the Phoenix project. Michael's smile wavered slightly. What about it? Well, after analyzing all the documents we found in Rodriguez's deposit, we discovered something interesting, she said, opening the folder she brought. Your father not only terminated the project when he realized its ethical implications, he also implemented a series of protocols and guidelines to ensure Johnson Tech would never again be involved in similar projects. Michael took the documents Mariana handed him, his eyes quickly scanning the pages. It was a detailed set of ethical principles and review procedures, all dated shortly after the Phoenix project's termination. This is, Michael began, his voice choked with emotion. The foundation upon which Johnson Tech's ethical reputation was built, Mariana completed softly. Your father didn't just correct a mistake, Michael. He transformed that experience into a driving force for good. Michael was silent for a few moments, absorbing the information. Finally, he looked at Mariana, gratitude in his eyes. Thank you for this, Mari. You have no idea how much this means to me. She smiled gently. I thought you'd like to know. Sometimes it's important to remember where we came from to know where we're going. After Mariana left, Michael remained in his office, reflecting on everything that had happened. Emily's betrayal, Rodriguez's manipulations, the revelations about his father, everything seemed part of a complex journey that had led him to this moment. His phone vibrated, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Emily. Can I see you tonight? There's something I need to tell you. Michael hesitated for a moment before responding. Sure. The usual cafe, 8 p.m.? The response came almost immediately. Perfect, see you then. As the sun began to set, painting the sky over San Francisco with orange and pink tones, Michael prepared to leave the office. He stopped for a moment before his father's portrait on the wall. Thank you, Dad, he murmured, for everything. The cafe was quiet when Michael arrived. Emily was already there, seated at a corner table, 2 steaming coffee cups before her. Hi, she said softly when he approached. Hi, Michael responded, sitting down. How are you? Emily took a deep breath before responding. Good, I think. Considering everything, actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Michael nodded, encouraging her to continue. I I received a job offer, she said, in Seattle, an ethical marketing company. They were impressed with my story of, well, redemption, I guess. Michael felt a confused mix of emotions, surprise, pride, and a twinge of sadness. That's great, Emily, really great. She looked him in the eyes, searching for something in his expression. I wanted you to know from me before making my final decision. After everything that happened, you deserve to know. Michael was silent for a moment, absorbing the news. Finally, he spoke. You should accept. It's an incredible opportunity for a new beginning. Emily nodded slowly. I know, but part of me wonders if there's something here worth staying for. The air between them was charged with unresolved tension and unexplored possibilities. Michael knew that his next response could change the course of both their lives. Emily, he began carefully, what happened between us wasn't simple. There were lies, betrayal, pain. But there were also moments of true connection and, in the end, courage to do the right thing. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. I can't promise everything will return to how it was before. I don't even know if that would be possible or even desirable. But what I can say is this: if you decide to stay, I'm willing to try. To see if we can build something new, something based on honesty and mutual trust. Emily's eyes filled with tears. You really mean that? Michael nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. Yes, I do. But the decision is yours, Emily. Seattle is an incredible opportunity, and I would completely understand if you chose to follow that path. Emily was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she extended her hand across the table, gently touching Michael's. I think, she said softly, that some things are worth fighting for. If you're willing to try, I am too. Michael intertwined his fingers with hers, feeling a wave of hope he hadn't experienced in weeks. Then let's try. Together. While they continued their conversation, planning the next steps of their journey of reconstruction, the cafe around them buzzed with the city's energy. Outside, San Francisco continued its frenetic rhythm, indifferent to the small drama of redemption and new beginnings unfolding in a corner table. For Michael and Emily, the future was still uncertain. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, and undoubtedly obstacles to overcome. But that night, sitting across from each other, sharing cautious smiles and renewed hopes, they felt they were on the right path. The journey of healing and reconstruction was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, both felt truly hopeful about what was to come. 1 year passed since that night at the cafe, where Michael and Emily decided to give a second chance, not only to their relationship, but to themselves. Time brought changes, challenges, and above all, growth. It was a sunny Saturday morning when Michael woke up, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. He smiled, seeing Emily on the apartment's balcony, a steaming cup in her hands, observing the city awakening. Good morning, he said softly, joining her. Emily turned, a smile illuminating her face. Good morning, sleepyhead. Ready for the big day? Michael nodded, taking the cup she offered. More than ready. Nervous but ready. The big day they were referring to was the inauguration of the Johnson Tech Ethics in Technology Center, a project Michael had conceived in the months following the confrontation with Rodriguez. It was an ambitious initiative aimed at promoting ethical practices in technological development, offering courses, lectures, and consulting for sector companies. Your father would be proud, Emily said softly, placing a hand on Michael's arm. He smiled, covering her hand with his. Thank you. You know, sometimes it's still hard to believe everything that happened in the last year. And indeed, it had been a year of transformations. Johnson Tech not only recovered from the scandal, but emerged stronger and more respected than ever. The transparency with which Michael handled the situation, publicly admitting past mistakes and committing to an ethical future, won the admiration of many in the sector. Emily, in turn, had refused the Seattle offer and decided to stay. In the months that followed, she worked tirelessly to rebuild her career and reputation. She started as a volunteer consultant at a local NGO focused on technological education for youth in underprivileged communities, work that ultimately became her passion. The path to rebuilding their relationship was not easy. There were moments of doubt, heated arguments, and nights of tense silence. But there were also laughs, deep conversations late into the night, and gradually the rebuilding of trust. "We should get ready," Michael said, looking at the clock. "Guests will start arriving in a few hours." While preparing, Michael couldn't help reflecting on the journey that brought them here. Emily's betrayal, which once seemed to be the end of everything, ended up being the catalyst for a profound transformation, not just in their personal lives, but in Johnson Tech itself and how it operated in the world. Hours later, Michael stood on a podium, facing a crowd of familiar and strange faces. Journalists, technology sector leaders, politicians, and activists, they were all there to witness the center's inauguration. "Welcome," Michael began, his voice firm and clear. "A year ago, we faced a crisis that threatened not just our company, but the very principles on which it was built. Today we are here not to forget this past, but to learn from it and build a better future." His eyes found Emily in the front row, and he smiled softly before continuing. "The Johnson Tech Ethics in Technology Center is not just a building or a program. It's a commitment to transparency, responsibility, and the positive impact technology can have in our lives." As Michael spoke about the center's objectives and planned programs, he felt a wave of pride and gratitude, pride for the hard work his team had done to make this possible, and gratitude for the second chance life had given him, both in business and in love. After the speech, while guests explored the center's facilities, Michael found a moment of tranquility with Emily. "You were incredible up there," she said, her eyes sparkling with admiration. Michael smiled, taking her hand. "It wouldn't have been possible without you. Your courage in admitting your mistakes, your dedication to doing the right things, that inspired me more than you can imagine." Emily blushed slightly, squeezing his hand. "I think we both learned a lot in the last year." "Yes," Michael agreed. "About forgiveness, about second chances, about building something better from the ashes of what was destroyed." In that moment, watching the guests interact, animatedly discussing ethics and technology, Michael felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The crisis that almost destroyed everything he loved had transformed into an opportunity to create something truly meaningful. "So," Emily asked softly, "what comes now?" Michael looked at her, seeing not just the woman he loved, but a partner, a confidant, someone who challenged him to be better every day. "Now," he responded, a smile spreading across his face, "we start the next chapter, together." As they rejoined the guests, Michael reflected on the journey that brought them there. From the heights of happiness to the abyss of betrayal, and back to a place of deeper understanding and love, he knew the future would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to grow, learn, and make a difference. The story of Michael and Emily, like that of Johnson Tech, was one of redemption, of second chances, and of transforming adversities into opportunities. And as the sun began to set over San Francisco, painting the sky with gold and pink tones, Michael felt a profound certainty that the best was yet to come. It was not a traditional happy ending. It was a new beginning, full of promises and possibilities. And for Michael and Emily, that was more than enough. It was everything they could have hoped for, and more.